Today we have in our studio Lloyd Malcolm Clarkson, who has been a seeker and been a close friend of mine. At the age of 23, deep intervention stepped into his life and transformed his life in the pursuit of health, wellness, accountability. Today, on a special request, he has come to share his insights about his personal journey, about his life, his struggles, and how he had overcome all those.
Well, thank you. It's a pleasure to be here.
Thank you so much, Malcolm.
Thank
Thanks a
you.
lot for coming all the way from Ireland for this interview.
Yeah, it's pretty exciting. Yeah, I'm looking forward to our conversation.
So let's roll back to 1960s and 70s when you were born.
Oh,
So how was your upbringing and how was it in those era?
well, it's I come from a large family of 8 children, 7 surviving, um, and my parents divorced when I was 10, and it was just a childhood that I knew. I I'll caution everybody right now. I've just been officially acknowledged and diagnosed with ADHD, so I have a propensity to ramble and stuff. So I'll attempt not to. And I go into storyline after storyline. Everything's nested deeply for me. So without getting in particulars, because I do speak my particulars regularly, I drove cab for 30 years in Victoria, which was a great way to process life with a multitude of people from all walks of life. So back in the childhood, very capital, provincial town. And yeah, there's a lot of stressors. My mother, looking back, my mother was under a lot of stress when she was pregnant with me, and research and studies and meditations I've done on that being in the womb at that time resonates with me of stress propensities that I have. And then the family, the community, local climate that I was raised in with all the particulars, like had its own stressors. And the way I dealt with things, I didn't speak for about 3.5 years because looking back, it was like, this is crazy. This whole world stuff is crazy. And I'm going to just monitor everything and stay quiet. And when I was about 3.5, my mother said to my older siblings, my 4 older siblings, you guys have to quit speaking for Malcolm. He's got to learn to speak for himself. And I think within about a week, she regretted that because I haven't shut up since. I process out loud, which under future diagnosis, it makes a lot of sense. That being said, so in my, and I was a very small, effeminate type of child. Later, many years later, we found out that I was celiac, so that explains a lot. But it also explains a lot of developmental processes that were going on or lack thereof. And yeah, so I interacted with the world with just say things, do stuff, because I needed feedback. And that's how I learned. I didn't get the structured parenting at home because basically my mother was a single mother even when my father.
So would it be right to say that you were brought up by a commune?
I was brought up by a loving mother who had limited resources and time and such. And she would say things like, do whatever you want, kid, just don't hurt yourself or anybody else. She didn't have time to nurture and coddle individually like you would if you have 1 or 2 children. And yeah, so she provided support. I knew she loved us. And yeah, and so we just made our kind of way and in life.
What happened then at the age of 23?
Well, up until that point, there was an incident when I was about 4 or 5 years old of sexual assault, and that was very pivotal in my thinking. It was, and then the shame or the fear and not being able, I wasn't able to talk about that because one of the aspects of talking a lot of people just think you're telling stories and you're full of.
I just wanted to ask you, how would a child of 4 or 5 year old have that kind of an understanding that they have been assaulted?
Oh, well, I won't get in. Fortunately, it wasn't violent and it wasn't anybody I knew. It was in a local park. And it was apparent that something was amiss.
Mm-hmm.
And anyways, I use that as an example because that's the earliest example where I had a realization something was wrong and I didn't know how to deal with it. And fortunately, I wasn't under personal attack or threat or harm, in physical harm. And that was a starting point of down the road, I started smoking. And then I started when I was 13 or so. And my mother was amazing. She found out I was smoking, and she just looked at me and she said, "Oh, so I hear you're smoking. So you think you're a pretty tough kid, eh? You think you can smoke behind my back? Do you have any courage to smoke in front of me?" Like,
that was at the age of 13?
Oh, yeah. Yeah, so my mother, she didn't give me heck. She just said, "Oh, this is what I hear. So, can you do it in front of me? Like, are you willing to own up?" Kind of. And it was events, things like that my mother always would say. And even when I was a teenager, she says, just kids, just so you know, I hate teenagers and teenagers hate me and I hate teenagers. In other words, she's saying, I love you. And another thing she would say is, kid, I love you doesn't mean I'm always going to like you. Mm-hmm. So she was implanting in me the thing that.
The values.
Yeah. I can do whatever I want. Just don't hurt myself or anybody else. And to learn to be accountable. But she can't tell me how to be accountable. We have to experience that. And then so eventually then I started drinking, like trying drinks. But then also I found it settled a lot of angst in me. And then it became like anything. It became my way of dealing or softening things that I didn't understand, which eventually caused me problems down the road.
So would you say that addiction happened because of the personal?
I firmly believe for myself, and I only speak for myself. I don't speak for anybody here. I believe that addiction, compulsive or obsessive behavior is a pointer to an earlier issue. And then if I take a look at the earlier issue, that's generally a pointer to an earlier issue. So yes. So it doesn't matter all the different types of addiction or behaviors that I got into. What happened when I was 23, and I had suicidal thoughts throughout my life to that point, and I still have had them. But I was staying at my brother and sister-in-law's in Victoria, and I was driving home one afternoon, on November 15th of 1981, and a thought came in my head was, you have no reason why not to take your own life anymore. Like, your parents are adults, your siblings are, you can, why not?
Did you had a spiritual awakening at that point?
Well, so that thought came in. Right behind that thought, another thought came in, and it was so calm. It was so calm, and I'm driving, and it's just so calm and peaceful. Another thought came in. It was like, if you were in 12-step meetings, you wouldn't be spending all your money in the bar. And that made sense to me because money was an issue to me. I didn't have respect for money because money represented power and authority. So I just, used it to get through.
You mentioned about a 12-step technique, right? I guess, would you want to brief it a little more to our viewers?
I'll get right to that in a moment. So when the thought said, if you're in a 12-step meetings, you wouldn't be spending your money in the bar. The next thought says, okay, I'll join the 12-step program and I'll volunteer at some thing. I went home to my brother and sisters, and I didn't drink for 12 and a half years after that. I went into the 12-step program.
And what is this 12-step program?
It's called Alcoholics Anonymous, which, and the 12 steps and the 12 traditions. And I like to separate. There's the Fellowship of Alcoholics Anonymous, and then there's the literature. It's like any organization or group. You have the rules or the policies or whatever, and then you have the actual practice of it, right? Theory and practice. And you have fellowship, which is different, because in the 12-step program, the way I read it is it's a personal program. And step 1 tells me that we admitted that we were powerless, in this case, over alcohol, and our lives had become unmanageable. And my life was unmanageable. And step 2 is came to believe that a power greater than ourselves could restore us to sanity. And that was a given. I knew my behavior was not sane, was not sound. So I could say, call me anything. Step 1, call me anything. Step 2, yes, my behavior is not very sound. And step 3, made a decision to turn our will and the lives over to the care of God as we understand Him.
You remember it line by line.
Praying only for knowledge of His will and the power to carry that out. So to me, that's the first 3 steps. And that was and in the literature, the 12 and 12, it talks about a willingness. It says that the whole rest, to paraphrase it, I'm not quoting it well, but the whole rest of the effectiveness of the 12-step program rests on how well and earnestly we practice willingness in all our affairs.
So Malcolm, is this 12-step program available to the common man out there?
Oh, it's all around the world, and it's many different forms now. There's many different other 12-step programs.
And is it called 12-step program?
That's the generic name, because it's many. The initial 12-step program, and it does say, and I'm not a member. I will not call myself a member of Alcoholics Anonymous, but it's called Alcoholics Anonymous because I'm speaking only for myself. And it says in one of the traditions that we, about anonymity at the level of press, radio, and film, right? I don't drink anymore. I didn't drink for 12 and a half years. I did resume occasionally. I don't drink now at all because it's just not my lifestyle.
So apart from the 12-step program, what was the biggest motivational factor for you to quit?
Oh, no. It was the divine intervention that gave me it. I can't even explain. It was a spiritual awakening. It was an enlightening. It was whatever it was. I cannot explain. All I can say was divine intervention, which moved me into Alcoholics Anonymous, which was a wonderful fellowship of people. And it's fascinating because you get the whole spectrum of people in Alcoholics Anonymous. You get people that have a hard time existing on a day-to-day basis. I've met powerful people from all walks of life who you wouldn't even know that they were in a 12-step program, because it's about integrating back into life and being accountable for one's life.
So what would be your advice to people who are addicted to smoking or drinking or are in any kind of drug?
Well, I'm very reluctant to give advice. What I like to do is share my experience, strength, and hope. So if anybody's struggling, what I've shared actually at one point in my early 30s, I was asked to speak at schools, and much like you asked me to speak here, out of the blue. I wasn't promoting it, because that's another thing in the 12-step program. It talks about attraction rather than promotion. I'm not out here to promote myself.
Yeah, totally.
And so I was asked if I could speak, and I went to a grade 8 class, and I started sharing exactly that, my experience, strength, and hope. And at the end of the class, the counselor at the school was very concerned. He said, "Do you have any literature?" I said, "No." He says, "You're going to be speaking to these kids for like half an hour or 45 minutes. I said, "That's okay."
And it all came from the life experiences?
Oh, it came from divine intervention, because I knew, like I said the Serenity Prayer, because I said, God, if I'm involved in here, we're all in trouble. So I got to get out of the way, and you got to work through me. So I sat down in his chair, and the teacher was sitting there monitoring quite closely for a bit. And I started sharing my story and what it was like. And that's what they do in the 12-step program. What it's like, what happened, and what it's like now. So I said what it was like. It was chaotic. And I told him some of the stories, but it also was appropriate for grade 8. Later on, I spoke to a grade 4 class. and I didn't tell him, I told him different stories, the same thing. And like what I found is it doesn't matter if I'm running to something or running from something. The issue is the running, right? So the drinking, like the smoking, maybe not in the beginning, but there came a point that I was using it to run or hide from something, or I'm running to it. And I had to stop the running. And the running is to stop, take a breath, and see things for what they are. We hear a lot of today, the words phobia. Oh, they're phobic. Everybody's phobic nowadays. My understanding, and please understand, I did not graduate grade 12 until I was 55. That was 10 years ago. And but my understanding of phobia is an irrational fear of. There are rational fears. So
could you cite an example? What would be an irrational fear?
Oh yeah. Well, if I just started thinking that the cameraman over here is going to start screaming at me because I'm not talking the way he'd like me to talk, and I start getting all panicky, then I'm going to start getting all anxious, and I'm going to start looking at the cameras, and I'm going to start thinking, oh, this is going out to the world, and then I'm out of the moment. And so, see, me just saying that, my legs start tingling. I go, oh, wow, what a feeling, right? And that's not the feeling that can be, listen to those feelings. That's saying, okay, great, I'm in my body. But if I let those feelings activate my mind and I start thinking worst case scenario, because I was taught that as well, a very good intention. A lot of my things my mother said, like she said, she would say to me when I was young, think of the worst case scenario and work your way back, right? So that is good in theory, but that's not so good in day-to-day practice because, and so I had to learn to moderate that. But that was a tool that she had available to me, right? To try to teach me a dynamic.
So what other mental challenges, health issues you had when you were facing or going through all these challenges?
Well, recently I went to a doctor. I quit going to doctors quite a while ago. Got tired of some of the politics in the medical system, even though I had a heart attack and I should have been going to doctors. Recently, I saw a doctor, and I showed him a new doctor. I showed him my history. And so there's, I think I've been diagnosed or at least suggested or recommended by a doctor that I'm bipolar 2 or bipolar 2.
And that is something diagnosed by the doctor?
I believe so, yeah. Depression, lifetime celiac, which affects the autoimmune disease, lifetime, a couple other lifetime.
And how do they come on to these conclusions?
Oh, well, by tests, and I do the tests and the blood work. And actually, in my early 30s, I end up going to an intensive psychotherapy program for 12 weeks to deal with the angst. Yeah, because at this point I'd been sober and I got married sober, I had children sober, went through a divorce sober. And again, I was back into this extreme anxious mode, and like, I don't know how to do this. Like, I feel like a terrible person. I failed as a father, sober. I failed a marriage and as father and as sober and everything else. And again, it's this feeling, I don't know what to do. I just want to die. And fortunately, I had the opportunity to go to an intensive psychotherapy program, which was amazing. It's hard work
intensive psychotherapy. That's what you call it?
Oh yeah, no, that's what they called it. It was provided here. It's in British Columbia through the medical plan, and so I got more insight because again, a friend of mine once told me shortly after I quit drinking, he was a paramedic and he went to many suicide attempts. And one thing he found in common is that it's not that people want to die, it's they don't know how to live. And for whatever reasons, there are a percentage of people, and I don't know what the percentage is, again, I'm not an academic, that are susceptible to anxieties such that create these conditions. And most people want to live. And how do you live within the chaos? You do most of us do the best we can. I believe, and I drove taxi for the last 30 years of my working career in Victoria, and I got to meet people from all walks of life. Powerful, rich, famous, poor, people on their death's door.
What is that one common thing that you have seen in all? I mean, that's a very good example that you said that, I mean, your profession would have made you meet so many different people, so many different stories, right?
Yeah.
So what was that common theme that you
Life. Yeah, because with talking with them, I talked with these people from all walks of life. Astrophysicists, quantum physicists, world educators, people that know presidents and prime ministers, and people that had it all and lost all, people that lived on the street, and talking like this, all that falls away. The pretentiousness falls away. We can talk about our own personal hurts and our struggles. Because one of the most powerful experiences I had was only in the last 5, 6, 7 years ago. I met a young woman who survived at the age of 5 a Rwandan genocide. I won't go into a personal story, but it was absolutely horrific.
At the age of 5, is that?
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Yes. And this woman is so amazingly beautiful. She's so amazingly beautiful. And I said to her, I'm born and raised in Victoria, and I can cry about my childhood and whatever. I read a fascinating book many years ago called Children Without a Conscience. It's called High Risk, Children Without a Conscience. It's about attachment disorder. Fascinating.
Children Without a Conscience?
Yes. High Risk, Children Without a Conscience. Fascinating book on attachment disorder. And so I said, I have my little whines and, my heartaches or, and people say, oh, don't cry. People got it worse in other countries, And this woman who survived at the age of 5 the Rwanda genocide, just brings tears. This is some things she shared. Said to me, a child's pain is a child's pain. It's not comparative. It doesn't matter to a child if they're facing what she faced as a 5-year-old, what people are facing in war-torn countries, or people are facing in drug-addicted homes or overcrowded daycares, or they're in a fancy home with the nanny and the nanny's busy, or the parents are emotionally unavailable. A child's pain is a child's pain. And when we're hurting, that's loss of connection. However it comes about, we can tell the stories and the datas and that doesn't matter. It's the loss of connection. And addiction is about trying to kill the pain of the addiction. And so.
And I know you got a bit emotional while.
Oh, it's all good. Oh, you were asking about yoga.
No, I was coming on to yoga.
Yeah.
But my question was, how, as a society or as an individual, we can help these children, these kids, to at least to our best capacity to eradicate that pain, or
on as a society, again, back to the 12-step literature, it's just attraction rather than promotion. So we got to model the behavior. I came years ago in the 12-step programs, and there's lots of different ones, and I've checked out on numerous ones. There's ones for children and teens and different types of addictions. And people would say to me, fake it till you make it. And I didn't like that. I didn't like that because that's very heady stuff.
There's a TED talk also on this. Fake it till you make it, and they endorse it also. Like you have to fake it till you actually.
No, I understand that, and I like that, but that was a jumping point because for me it didn't. It
didn't resonate.
It did resonate, but it caused more tension, and so I came up with for myself, and I wasn't their original person to say this. Nothing I say is original. It's been said before. And that is, believe as if and act accordingly. So if I want goodness in my life, believe as if I'm good and act as accordingly to what my belief good is. And that changes with your experience, depending on what it is. right? So when I quit drinking at 23, when I say I quit, divine intervention, I started as a dishwasher, 23 years old. I'd been in construction prior to that. I started as a dishwasher. Every time the cook turned his back, I did what the cook was doing. Within a month, I was cooking. Without any training, I was cooking. Within a month and a half, I was opening and closing the restaurant. You know, then I got married, and I was moving up in the restaurant business, and then my wife became unhappy, and she chose to leave. And I was so fortunate in that, where we were young, and she said, if I don't leave you now, I'm going to end up hating you. I don't want to do that. Your children are your children. Your girls are your girls. I'll let nobody between you and them. And she honored that. And that was devastating for me. But within that, I'm yelling how she broke my heart. Divine intervention stepped in again, and all of a sudden I went very calm. When I say I went, my being went very calm. And I looked at her, I said, you know what? I said, if I wasn't involved in this relationship, I'd be very proud of you. As a matter of fact, I am very proud of you, because what you're doing takes a lot of courage. That being said, at this moment, I'm too angry to care right now, but she honored that. And I knew that if I wanted the best for my daughters, who were 2 and 4 at the time, I had to wish the best for their mother and be as supportive as I could. A good marriage takes 2 people and a lot of work. A good divorce takes 2 people a lot of work. If you got kids, do the work. If you don't have the kids, do the work, because you will benefit and the community will benefit.
That was my follow-up question. Like, why do we see relationships not being successful as they used to be back then? Because the reason why I'm asking you this question is because you mentioned about your...
I think it's perspective. It's perspective, and perspective is subjective, and it's within set and setting. You know, it's like everything's set and setting. When I say everything, I don't generally like using absolutes, but even this conversation we're having, there's a set here. There's a setting. There's an intention in a relationship. There's a set and setting. If it's defined, if it's not, if we just see each other and we're attracted, and you know, maybe their hormones take over or whatever, and we don't have a set and setting, it can go in whatever direction.
Can be a foundation, basically.
A framework. It can be anything. A framework, a foundation, a code of agreements. Like morals, it is a set and setting that are created naturally by people coming together. Ethics. This is from what I understand. Again, I'm just from what people taught me, because my cab driving for 30 years after I started going through the divorce was my education. It was my therapy. It was my education. It was the reunification into life. It was putting theory, my believe as if and act according, into practice. And I can sit and meditate now for hours. I can lay in a float tank for 10 hours. You know, I did that for 3 times a week for a long period of time as I was going through crisis in the last 7 years, that I was way over my head. I can do that, but that doesn't mean anything if I can't get out of that float tank, get out of that meditation, and
make it a part of your life,
and interact in life with, as the Socratics would say, the good, the true, and the beautiful.
Since you spoke about meditation,
yes.
When was the first time you got introduced to meditation? How has your journey been?
I got into about 2012. It was my eldest daughter Skyped me from Chiang Mai, Thailand, and she said, "Daddy, Treehouse with Wi-Fi, woohoo!" And then she says, "I'm going to go to a 10-day silent meditation in Laos for." Imagine me not talking for 10 days, and so off she goes. And 12 days later, she Skypes me again from Chiang Mai. Very calmly, she says, "Dad, that's so cool." She says, "You got to go to a Vipassana. They're all around the world." I said, "Yeah, imagine me not talking for 10 days, sweetheart." So I said, "Okay," because whatever my girls ask me, if it's reasonable, even if it's awkward, I'm going to do. So I went to a 10-day silent meditation, and fortunately, I stayed. My only goal for the 10-day silent meditation up in Merritt, Vipassana, was not to leave there screaming before the end of the 10 days.
And were you successful?
Yes, I didn't leave screaming. As you've noted to me personally off air for the last 5 years, I wasn't so quiet in the meditations at times, and wasn't so still at times, but I didn't leave screaming.
this is for my viewers to tell them that Vipassana is basically a 10-day program which is taught globally, and they don't charge a dime. And it's a 10-day program wherein you are not supposed to talk to anyone, you're not supposed to read anything, you're not supposed to carry any books. It's just a silent meditation, or a retreat, you can call it, wherein you just focus on your breath, you just focus on your sensations. And that is basically, and would you want to talk more about this form of meditation?
Well, so that was the jumping off. So I went and did that in 2013. And then life continues to happen.
Mm-hmm. Okay, go ahead.
Life continues to happen. And then when I was 2017, my father passed away, I was extremely close to him. I really reunited with him after I quit drinking. Anyways, long story, I won't get into it, other than to say I was way over my head. And my suicidal thinking was back. It's like, but I can't harm myself or harm anybody else, because that's a bad legacy for my daughters. And so I thought, oh yes, a 3-day silent meditation. So I signed up for the 3-day meditation in October of 2019. And in November, I was confirmed for this. And so the next day I'm telling this guy that in my cab, I was confirmed for the silent meditation. And he said, oh, he couldn't do that. But he mentioned float tanks, Float House Victoria. So I went to float the next day. And the floating, I was able to go in there, check it out, Float House Victoria, Float House West Shore. Anyways, I was able to go in there, and I brought the Vipassana meditation technique with me in there.
While lying down
and I started to calm down. And then at the end of December 26, I went to Duncan Vipassana Meditation, is where I met you. And that increased my ability to, my meditative ability. And so over the new year, I was practicing that more and floating more. And I got into my cab on the first Monday of 2020, and I sat very calmly in my cab, and I thought, this is so cool. I can meditate, I can float, I'm so peaceful. And then the thought came in my head was, legal matters are going to start again soon. The rage and the anger, it was like the molten core that just tore through my body. And very quietly, divine intervention, whatever you want to call it, very quiet voice said,
settle down.
Said, oh no, we're going to do a
3D course.
A triple float. So that's 5.5 hours on Friday. And I go, what? That's 5.5 hours. It's so. And so I got into floating. I picked up floating, and that increased. And so in floating, I've floated within 3 years, close to 600 hours of floating. Longest I floated was 12 hours. And again, I say that because in there, for me, I was able to meditate, be in a meditate state, and drift in and out of consciousness and become like Michael Singer says in the Untethered Soul, Living Untethered, sitting in the witness seat of consciousness. And the float tank allowed me to do that. And actually, I've had experience of I relived being in my mother's womb.
Wow.
And I say this again, to describe it would take infinite length of time. But the whole idea was to experience, and this is what the meditation does for me. And the yoga, as I understand yoga, I'm not talking about the body work yoga, which I have very dear loved ones who are instructors in that and such. I'm talking about the union, the yoking together. Because I believe that I'm a mental, spiritual, physical being. I believe that the three beings together is a symbiotic relationship. If one weakens, the other two do, and vice versa. Any one weakens. And for me, it's to reunify the three entities, the mental, spiritual, physical maladies. In the AA literature, it says we have a mental, spiritual, physical maladies. And to me, that's what the yoga practice
meditation.
is to reunify, because back to when I was sexually assaulted when I was 4 or 5 years old, I believe I basically left my body. So I was tethered to the body, emotionally, whatever, but I basically, and the addiction was to deal with the conflict of that. The divine intervention was to start to bring that together, and then I had started to experience life, and that's the thing, again, back in the 12-step literature, is to get back into the mainstream of life. And to me, to be in the mainstream of life is to be able to deal with life on life's terms. Okay. And I understand we're getting close to, but I just want to reference with equanimity. In that Vipassana, Goenkaji speaks of equanimity. And I had a hard time. I kept asking the poor guy who was leading the thing, what is this equanimity? And he kept explaining. I still couldn't get it. Mm-hmm. But equanimity, I understand it today as to be calm and what?
Just to
be. To be calm and sound in all moments. So wars could be breaking around, but to have equanimity, to be calm in that, so not to get tricked, so I could see things for what they are and respond appropriately rather than reacting. Because addictive behavior is reactive behavior. And at that point, I would suggest Dr. Gabor Mate, When the Body Says No, and Dr. Bessel van Gogh in The Body Keeps the Score.
Thank you so much, Malcolm. Thanks a lot. Thanks a lot for sharing your insights. I guess we can go on and on. There is so much for you to share. And there's so much for me to ask you as well. Yeah. But I'll just wind it up by some good words from you for our organization, how you have been connected to this organization, and any good words of support from you would be great.
Oh, how I'm connected is you asked me to come along. I thought we were going to go and do a little meditation with the seniors again, like we did a couple of weeks ago. And it's about resonance. I met you, like I say, 5 years ago, 4.5 years ago. There was a resonance. And I don't see you often. I don't see you often, but yeah. I feel one with you. And when you asked me, or you said you were going to do a meditation the other day, 2 weeks back, I'd love to go to witness. I wanted to witness you, and then invited me to this. And I didn't know what I was getting into, but the resonance drew me.
And you're happy with the kind of work that we guys are doing?
Oh, I'm very pleased. It resonates. I was reading this celebration of the Yogic Way of Life, 2023, and it resonates with me. You know, not that I can do anything near perfect, but, you know, the Tao says something to the effect, one can never attain enlightenment, but one must always strive for it. Then it goes on to say, having attained enlightenment, I go, what? You just said you can't do it. Don't worry about it. Lion King, that's in the past. Having attained enlightenment, it's nothing special. So if I think I'm enlightened and I'm all excited about it, get over it. It's nothing special. You're not enlightened, right? So it's just about being in the moment. And to me, so back to the yoga, being united in the moment. So I have equanimity, so I can live life and respond to it appropriately rather than react out of fear. Course in Miracles talks about love and fear. I much rather respond out of love to the best of my ability than fear. And as one of my other teachers, Richard Haig, who developed the Warriors Meditation, says, just soften the attitude. Just soften. So if I'm angry, fearful, overly excited, just soften it.
So today's message would be just soften the attitude.
Yeah.
Thank you so much, Malcolm. It was a pleasure to have you.
Thank you very much.
Thanks a lot.
Thank you.
And I wish you all the best.
Thank you.
And hope to see you soon.